So we talking about the almighty AL4 automatic transmission. Um, my perspective of the gearbox. I know I've shared it many times on posts, articles, videos. Uh, we'll continue to share for those who probably have not read the other messages or watch the videos on that I did on that subject. So AL4 is a model of automatic transmission you find Peugeot cars of the past, produced late 90s, and stopped sometime 2010 or so. Within that time, or probably a little bit after or above 2010. So you find it in 206, 307, 406, 407, 807. I don't know which other one. There could be more that I don't have, I know of it. And then some Citroen cars. So it's a 4-speed automatic transmission, which was later succeeded by 88. No, yeah, 88. So, one of the weaknesses of that gearbox is it doesn't handle heat very well. It doesn't handle heat very well. So when they start aging, those heat, the hotter the gearbox ATF, the more it disrupts the proper functioning of the gearbox or performance of the gearbox. So whenever anybody tells me his AL4 has a problem, I always know that most times it will be a valve body issue, because the valve body is being disturbed by the heat the gearbox generates. What I mean, I'm talking of the ATF. Of course, the ATF is channeled to the oil cooler, which draws coolant from the radiator. So it's the radiator that controls the temperature of the ATF inside the transmission via coolant. So there's a cooler a heat exchanger that is mounted on top of the gearbox, where the ATF comes up, goes back into the gearbox. So the coolant will now come from the radiator, enters the heat exchanger, then goes back to the radiator. So like I said, once the gearbox starts to age, you start disturbing it. So there are ways to prevent that from happening. The simplest option, but not cheap, is to convert to manual transmission, so avoid that headache going further. That's the cheapest option. That's, for a permanent solution, let me not call it the cheapest. Permanent solution is to convert to manual transmission. Hopefully the model of the car, of the Peugeot you find that gearbox, has that option. Maybe you have there's a conversion kit you can use, because not all of them probably may have the manual kit for a vehicle that has the AL4. So you might end up not having that option, unless you now have to figure out which conversion kit from another vehicle or from other cars you can use to do the conversion. Okay, so that is one, by the way. Other options to solve this problem is to be using recommended ATF, which currently they are expensive. The only one I know offered right now, the OEM, I'm not sure is available anymore. OEM ATF for that gearbox. no longer available. I don't know where you'll be able to find it, but there are good alternatives. One of them is liquid moly top tech 1200. It's not cheap in Nigeria, so that is it. But that's one of the ways of maintaining the gearbox, because that I believe is a synthetic oil, so it handles heat better than the mineral oil you find people use, especially in Nigeria, inside the gearbox. What other options? You convert the AL4 cooling from the coolant to air. That's air to ATF cooling, not coolant to ATF cooling. So the only thing with that air, because you have to convert, meaning that you have to, that place where coolant enters and comes off on the gearbox, the heat exchanger, you have to introduce it with something else that will run fluid inside instead. So unless there is a way, I don't know if I can say we'll be able to serve the same purpose that on that heat exchanger. Then in that case, you just run a hose to take air inside there, come out the other way. Depends on the conversion kit you are using. So now there's something like a small, I don't want to call it radiator. It just looks like AC. What's it called? That in Nigeria is called freezer. It's not expansion valve. Man, anyway, you get the idea. That thing that looks like condenser in front of the radiator. So the air to ATF cooling conversion kit, that particular thing can be mounted before or after the condenser, depending on how they position the fan. So if the fan is in front, if the fan is behind, then you have to put it either in front of the condenser, since the condenser is usually in front of radiator. So either you put it in front of the condenser, or you put it behind the condenser. No, either you put it in front of the condenser, or you put it behind the condenser. So it will now say in between the condenser and the radiator. Reason why I prefer that method is so that it can work with the fan, the car factory fan. We call that that air to ATF cooling it works with, as the car is in motion, as air is pulling in, it will serve as the cooling. It will now cool the ATF. So, but when the car is stationary, then the cooling stops. That's cooler air will no longer pass through the ATF, which becomes a problem. So I think in that method, I'm trying to remember, I think what that thing does is the ATF will now come out and get to in front of the radiator and then goes back. It's just like the days of 505. The ones with automatic transmission like ZF4HP22 that I know of, like the one in 505 V6, the coolant comes out from the gearbox. The ATF comes out from the gearbox, goes to the radiator, enters the radiator, then goes back to the gearbox. So I have not done this air to ATF conversion for the gearbox, but I think probably that's how it's designed. I hope I'm right. So when the car is stationary at a traffic or wherever, but it's not in motion, at that time it's no longer cooling. But when it's in motion, as air is pushing through, it's cooling the ATF. But with the fan, if you position that particular stuff that looks like condenser for the conversion kit, if you put it so that once the fan comes up, it will also work like it will be as if it's also the fan, the car is in motion, that's air is still pulling it. So it's either it's sucking the heat out of the ATF that is passing through that, or it's pushing the heat out, that's sucking it out or pushing the heat out of the that stuff. What's the name? What am I trying to remember? Wire, expansion valve, condenser. Oof. Man, this brain sometimes just shut down. I try to remember the name, the one that is under the dashboard. That's what I'm thinking now. Man. So, that can serve. If I were the owner, if I say, let me put it this way. Let's assume for some reason, even though I don't think it will ever be possible for me, but for some reasons, I like AL4, or I have a car that has AL4 and I want to maintain that AL4 in that car. So what I'm going to do is I will introduce that air to ATF cooling conversion kit instead of the coolant to be used as the cooling, as far as Nigeria is concerned. So I'll get that, I'll put that, I'll find a way to squeeze it to work so that the radiator fan can be able to work with it, or do the cooling with that for on that let me call it just condenser. So on that thing. So once it can do that, then it solves the problem of when the car is stationary and it won't be able to the ATF will still remains because once that happens, it means as the car temperature comes up, get to 98 degrees Celsius, the fan comes up, so it will cool it. If you are on AC, it means mostly the fan stays on when you are stationary, so it will do the cooling. So that's for me is how I would go about it. There are some other technicians that might go and install that particular component off the fan. So in that case, the fan won't be able to get to it. It won't be able to do its work. So you will only serve the gearbox when the car is in motion. Or unless there is a type of tiny fan, a small fan you can buy and mount it on that small condenser. Again, I'm just using that name for now. Mount it there so that one can be serving a different, also doing the serve as the cooling when the car is stationary instead of the radiator and the main condenser fan. So now there could also be a case where it might overcool the ATF, because ATF is supposed to actually get hot, but not too hot. So for AL4, yeah, it will be better. It also warms up the distance so that it will be able to shift better. So there's a device people also buy. It's actually a thermostat. So the thermostat will be monitoring the temperature of the ATF, which you now introduce on the line where the air or the ATF passes to the conversion kit. Those sources. Introduce it there so it will know if the temperature is okay, it will shut it down. No, if you start overcooling, it will open up so that no, it will shut it down. It will close it so it doesn't cool it anymore until it becomes hot again. Then it opens up. So there's an aftermarket thermostat that I can introduce for that to happen. So that's how I will go about it, so that I won't have to abuse or alter any factory setup. You alter anyway, since you are removing the coolant to do the cooling of the ATFs. It's altering the factory setup, but for me, it's one way to go about it. Another way to go about it is to buy if so, in fact, to bypass the fan, it's basically like an abuse, but you will still find a way to make it better. Not necessarily better than factory, but at least, let me explain so you understand. That's you bypass the cooling fan, the main radiator cooling fan, from the factory connection. So it will no longer be your engine ECU or fan control module or whatever that will control the fan. So you cut it off, buy an aftermarket fan trigger. I don't want to call that thing thermostat. I've done a video of that before. You buy aftermarket of that device and use it to connect the fan, which will also work with the AC, so that once you set it up at a particular temperature, so instead of the fan to come up at 100 degrees Celsius, you reduce it to like 80 degrees Celsius. So in that case, you don't need to alter the coolant to ATF cooling in the gearbox, but it will lower the temperature that the fan comes up, so that the heat doesn't get too high to affect the gearbox. So that's one way to do about it. But so but in that case, you've now altered the electrical system. The first one I mentioned, the conversion air to coolant to air to ATF cooling, means you alter the mechanical. But this one I'm telling you, alter the electrical. Another option, but that one is like very bad, which I'll never recommend. But I tell people, if you really want it that bad, this is an option. You remove your thermostat, one. You bypass the fan, cooling fan, to stay on constantly with either the ignition on or engine running, so that your ATF stays temperature. The ATF temperature stays much lower. So once that happens, what you realize, you hardly have your AL4 misbehave. I'm not saying it will never happen, but your valve body will hardly misbehave. Even if it's faulty, it will misbehave, but not as bad as when it's very hot, the ATF is hot. So it will keep the temperature of the ATF much lower. But then, at the detriment of your engine, you are going to kill that engine. So you are enjoying one thing and damaging something else rapidly at that time. Even your gearbox, you might actually be overcooling it, because you realize that once you remove your thermostat, bypass the fan to stay on constantly on high speed, you see that your coolant temperature gauge will already be much lower. So, which is also not good for the ATF. ATF needs to warm up. So these are the ways you can solve. I've given the first two I've given is what I'll probably go for. You convert to air cooling, or you introduce that device that triggers the fan at much lower temperature than the factory one, which is not too good for the engine, but it won't really damage it like this other one will do. It's just that if you sort of maintaining 95 degrees Celsius or thereabout, it maintains 80 degrees Celsius. You can set it as well at 40 degrees Celsius. So it all depends on you, how it triggers the fan to come up. In that case, you have only like one speed, actually. So those are the ways. The thing is, AL4, I don't enjoy driving one. I've never enjoyed driving any of them. There are some I'll drive, they will be good, they won't be giving you all those symptoms, but eventually, AL4, no matter how good it is, every once in a while you get that small, it's not, we call it a jerk, but it's not only the AL4. Most of the automatic transmission in Peugeot cars, they are not predictable. It's not something you could press down, expect it to downshift all the time, and it will wait. It may not downshift. So these are the ways. If you want to avoid that, try as best to use recommended ATF. They are expensive. If I were you, if I have an AL4, and they start giving that pop, I realize that nothing I can do, the valve body has failed. Just buy a new one. Buy a new valve body. They are not available in Nigeria. You can get them online. They are available online. Buy a new one. Some online are refurbished. That's faulty ones that they've actually repaired, because valve body mostly solenoids that are attached on there. So they will test all the solenoids, see the ones that are bad, replace them probably with new solenoids, and they will serve you. Hopefully the person that did the work did it well. But if you get a brand new one, those new ones are available. I'm not sure they're online. I'm not sure they are still OEM. Probably aftermarket ones. So hopefully they will serve. But I would rather go with new one than used one, because AL4, their weaknesses again is not being able to handle heat very well. And because of that, let me see. Okay, I don't know who this person is. So yeah, so that's all I will say. If you want to buy, just that don't travel often with that gearbox, with the vehicle with that gearbox, unless you be able to do all these things I mentioned. Use periodically change the ATF with the recommended expensive ones, or do some of these conversions on them that I mentioned. The ones that are much safer is the air to ATF conversion, or you leave all the systems, the mechanical part of the system, you alter the electrical by introducing something that will trigger the fan at much lower temperature. Or you now go the worst case, that's the worst way of dealing with the issue, by bypassing the fan connection completely, to stay on constantly, and then remove your engine thermostat. In that case, you lose your engine sooner than you expect, and your gearbox at some point may also start having problems, or may not have problems, but it won't shift very well because your ATF will be too cold. It's supposed to warm up to be able to do the job. So it may also affect your mechanical side of the gearbox over time. But at least you won't be having most of these issues that AL4 tend to exhibit when it becomes hot, the weak ones. So buy if you want to buy, no problem. Just understand the maintenance cost is much higher compared to the manual. So I think that's what I have to say now on this gearbox. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one. Kind of very tired today. I don't know if you guys picked it up. Just trying to see if I can just conclude this video. I'm very tired. All right.